The following program is sponsored by CBN.
Coming up.
If you didn't want to give it to me, I would take it from you.
An outlaw.
Armed robberies, breaking and entering, federal gun charges.
Who got started at a young age.
It was don't get caught.
Why the thought of freedom scared this fellow straight.
So I realized that could actually be me one day.
Plus, the most awarded female singer in Christian music history, the legendary Sandi Patty, shares how she found her voice on today's 700 Club.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 700 Club. We've got a busy news day for you, and I want to go over a few things because you hear all this stuff in the paper. Let me explain what may be happening that I think is important. Of course, the major news is that Donald Trump did what he was perfectly capable of doing. He asked for the resignation of one of his members of his cabinet. A president certainly does that after an election. It happens all the time, no problem. Of course, the Democrats are making out to be some nefarious conspiracy, but he asked Jeff Sessions to resign. Now, what did he do? What did Sessions do that was wrong? Well, he recused himself. He had had a minor discussion with some Russian at some cocktail party, and it was absolutely nothing. But he recused himself from all of the activity of his office, and in the process left the president totally naked because he was the man who was supposed to do the blocking and tackling for the guy carrying the ball, and he didn't do it. It's like the lineman in a major football game suddenly quit and leave the quarterback to defend for himself. They just don't do that. But he did it. He did it, and he felt so righteous that I've recused myself. Well, it ruined him. So what comes in, Rosenstein, his deputy, then does what nobody in his right mind would have done. He calls for a special counsel to go and investigate his boss, the president. I mean, it was shocking. It shouldn't have happened. And now we've got a situation where the Democrats are saying, well, we're going to get to the bottom of all this. Well, nonsense. Jenna Browder has a story about this, and we'll talk about the successor and what should happen, okay?
President Trump made his frustration with Jeff Sessions no secret, and yesterday, just one day after the midterm elections, took action asking for Sessions' resignation. Sessions departed the Justice Department in an emotional farewell.
I know, Jenna, you and I have been with the president where he has privately talked about Jeff Sessions and been very frustrated. I mean, he's publicly talked about it, but he's also privately been very frustrated with the fact that he recused himself. So this has been in the hopper for a while.
His replacement and former Chief of Staff Matthew Whitaker will now oversee the Russia investigation. That's raising concerns because of Whitaker's criticisms of the probe headed by Robert Mueller.
I could see a scenario where Jeff Sessions is replaced with a recess appointment, and that Attorney General doesn't fire Bob Mueller, but he just reduces his budget so low that his investigation grinds to almost a halt.
Nancy Pelosi, who's aiming to be the next speaker in the new Democrat-controlled House, tweeted, "It is impossible to read Attorney General Sessions' firing as anything other than another blatant attempt by real Donald Trump to undermine and end Special Counsel Mueller's investigation." Others are already promising investigations. In a press conference Wednesday, President Trump vowed to work with House Democrats and spoke well of Pelosi.
You know, she loves this country, and she's a very smart woman. She's done a very good job.
But he warned that investigations can work both ways.
They can play that game, but we can play it better because we have a thing called the United States Senate, and all you're going to do is end up in back and forth and back and forth, and 2 years is going to go up, and we won't have done a thing.
And there could be many investigations into the president when Democrats take control of the House this winter. They've already talked about issuing a subpoena for President Trump's tax returns. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
I want to go with you now about what is going on with this probe. When you have a special counsel, the mandate for such a person must be to investigate a specific crime. not to go on a fishing expedition around the country. It's a specific crime in a specific jurisdiction under a specific set of laws. Now, that man, Mueller, has not followed that. He has gone after various people in the Republican Party. He's going for bank fraud. He's going for tax fraud. He's going all this stuff. Has nothing to do with a Russian involvement in our election. Okay, he's been at it now for a long time, spent a lot of money. Now, what is coming up next? As I understand it, there are going to be several carefully vetted interrogatories in writing given to the president, and the president will answer those interrogatories, period. And it's time now for Mr. Mueller to issue a report of his findings. And what he's going to say is, I didn't find any Russian collusion anywhere. Now, that's what he's going to say. And when that's over, he should leave. And that should happen probably by Thanksgiving, certainly no later than Christmas. So his work is over. And in the process, though, he no longer will be reporting to Rosenstein, the deputy, because his boss now will be this Whitaker, the acting attorney general. But we haven't yet seen the authorizing documents that outline the scope of the activities of the special prosecutor. He did it, and he's expanded it, and he's amplified it, and never once has he given Congress or anybody else a look at what he said. Now, the Republicans in the House wanted to get him to come and testify. He has steadfastly refused to do it. He said, I'm not going to do it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to come after you. Well, that's what he said. And then in a joke, he said, I'm going to tape the president, and then I'm going to see if I can invoke the 25th Amendment and get him disqualified. I mean, this is what he said. Now, he said, well, I was only kidding. Well, was he kidding or was he not kidding? I mean, it's a pretty serious thing. And in my opinion, he needs to go, but I think the president doesn't want to ask for his resignation until after the Mueller thing is over. But the Mueller thing must wind down before Thanksgiving or before Christmas. They can't go any longer. He's done everything he can do, and there's been no evidence of any collusion with any Russian anywhere. Okay. Now, the new acting attorney general, Matt Whitaker, has joined the Justice Department last year. President Bush appointed him U.S. Attorney for Iowa's Southern District in 2004. Whitaker has questioned, as I have, the scope of Robert Mueller's investigation. He did it 2 years ago. In a CNN op-ed, he wrote that it would be a, quote, violation for Robert Mueller to investigate President Trump's finances. He added it would be dangerously close to crossing a red line. Now, in his college years, Whitaker played tight end for the University of Iowa and caught a pass in the 1991 Rose Bowl. Okay, so that's the man that's come in as Attorney General acting. And it seems like to me, if the president wants to get somebody, there's a congressman named Trey Gowdy who is unbelievably intelligent and knowledgeable about these things, and he might well, if they don't want Whitaker, they could go with Gowdy, and he'd be a tremendous attorney general.
What a mess.
What a mess. But this thing has been a fishing expedition, and now you see these Democrats are screaming, well, you've got to allow the scope of the investigation. He's investigated everything known to man, and then he's brought indictments against various people for bank fraud and financial crimes.
Things that had nothing to do with
Russia whatsoever. And Whitaker has said, look, if we don't fire him, we can starve him out. And I think that's a good thing, too. You can cut his budget. Yeah. But Rosenstein apparently has given him an unlimited budget and an unlimited scope. But he's never shown the papers to anybody. And, how do you know? It's all been done in secret. And apparently, behind the scenes, there was some collusion between Mueller and the former head of the FBI and various others in the Justice Department. They were all buddies. They all work together.
People are so critical of the things that the president tweets, and I think everybody'd like him to tweet in a little more civil manner. Yeah. But can you imagine what it's like to feel that kind of divisiveness, that kind of pressure, that kind of accusation every day when you're trying to get the job done.
Awful.
I mean,
and you read the New York Times, the Washington Post, they are just 100% against him. And I might add something else. There was a CNN reporter who misbehaved terribly in a press conference, refused to give the microphone to the young lady who was working for the White House to give the phone so others could have. And he's just had his press credentials revoked.
Well, it's time that people, yes, action needs to be taken when people are inappropriate.
Well, he was inappropriate, and he can't get into the White House anymore, and good for them. Whew. Okay, does that clarify anything?
That clarifies it.
All right, here we go. Anyhow, look for the Mueller thing to be wound up no later than Christmas. All right, well, another mass shooting in America, this time in California. John Jessup has more of that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
Pat, this latest shooting happened at a crowded bar about an hour from Los Angeles when a masked man walked in armed with a handgun and smoke grenades. Police say many lives were lost. Mark Martin reports.
Authorities say those who were shot and killed included people inside the bar and a police officer. The gunman was later found dead at the scene.
I was to the front door. I was talking to my stepdad, and I just started hearing these big pops, pop, pop, pop. There was probably 3 or 4. I hit the ground.
Customers at the Borderline Bar were there for its college country night. The popular spot in Thousand Oaks is about 45 minutes from Los Angeles.
Upon going through the front door, the sheriff's sergeant was struck multiple times with gunfire, and there were multiple other victims of different levels of injury inside that were rescued from the scene and taken to local hospitals.
Witnesses said the scene was chaotic.
I saw him point to the back of the cash register, and he just kept firing. I ran out the front door. I hear chairs being thrown out the window. People were trying to get out the window, and the gunman went behind the cash register. There was probably 12 shots before I got out the front door.
People scrambled for safety, fleeing in panic.
As our first deputies arrived on scene, they also heard shots.
This man helped pull people to safety.
And he basically was unloading, and all I did was grab as many people as I could and pull them underneath the table, and then till I heard the shots, till I heard a break in the shots, and then we got people out of there as much as we could.
Police say the only weapon found was a handgun. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Thanks, Mark. Pat?
You know, I really believe that a lot of these crazy gunmen are on some kind of medication. I don't know whether it's some kind of tranquilizer or something like that that causes some of this violence. But I can't believe that with that many crazy people in America. You think there are?
I can believe that, yeah.
So much for that. But no, seriously, I do believe some of these mass killings, the people have been mentally unhinged, but many of them are under psychiatric care and they're taking some kind of psychotropic type of medication. And I think it has an effect.
Well, and many of them are unhinged and not under psychiatric care. And how do you keep guns out of the hands of people like that?
Oh.
It's very challenging.
Who knows? John, let's talk about politics. What you got?
Well, Pat, turning to the recent elections, the Republican advantage in the Senate is still unclear. Races in Arizona and Florida are too close to call. In Arizona, Republican Martha McSally has a 1% lead over Democrat Kyrsten Sinema. And in Florida, Democrat Bill Nelson is calling for a recount after Governor Rick Scott's lead shrunk to less than 0.5%. Well, the results of the 2018 midterms shifted the balance of power right here in Washington, D.C., but as Chris Mitchell reports, they also affected capitals around the world, including Jerusalem.
While Republicans maintained control of the Senate, they lost the House.
There's a lot of power in the House. I mean, there's a lot of influence over appropriations. And so it's not going to be as easy for them as it has been. It's going to be a battle. I hope to God that Israel doesn't have to pay for it, because that would be a terrible mistake.
The next item on the agenda will likely be the president's peace plan.
The president has been pushing what he calls the deal of the century, an Israeli-Palestinian peace accord. And my assumption is that he will be pressing his peace plan more rigorously in the future. My own advice as a member of the Israeli government is that we study very seriously and take seriously this peace plan and try to respond to it as flexibly and openly as possible.
Palestinians see an opportunity.
The Democrats in the United States are getting closer to a position that may lead eventually to a peace process in the area, whereas his policy has really been a very difficult one to understand. It does not get us anywhere closer to a peace process. On the contrary, I think it makes it very difficult to reach a peace process. From that position, I think the result of the elections indicate a possibility of a change in American policy eventually.
Mike Evans serves on President Trump's Faith Advisory Board and is troubled by the recent history of Democrats with Israel's prime minister. Evans says the midterms pose a challenge to both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
There's never been a partnership with this great. There's never been an opportunity this great in the whole Middle East as there is right now. In the midterm elections is a very, very difficult dilemma for both of them to face right now.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Well, this just in. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been hospitalized. She fractured 3 ribs in a fall at her office. The 85-year-old Ginsburg is at George Washington University Hospital for observation and treatment. And Pat, this comes as the court just started its latest session last month.
Well, she's a brilliant woman, and I won't take anything from her. And I think everybody should pray for her that she'll be healed. But it does seem like she is a little bit over the hill and the time to say goodbye. And if this is the case, and it may happen, this will give President Trump another opening in the Supreme Court with a Senate that is much more favorable than the one that heard for Brett Kavanaugh. So the next hearing, he'll have 2 or 3 more Republican senators, so it'll be interesting. But I would just say pray for her. She's a very brilliant lady, sleeps a lot. It looks like
very fragile.
Very, very fragile woman. And all we can say is pray for her. She's a very fine lady, and she was, I think, confirmed with almost 99 votes. I mean, it was unbelievable when she'd been a member of the ACLU, but it didn't matter. Okay, Terry.
Well, coming up, he's a pastor in one of Christianity's most famous cities, which means he's often caught in the middle of a war zone.
Living in this divided land as a Christian Arab has challenged me to tear down barriers.
Bethlehem native Stephen Curry tells us how he's bridging the gaps between faiths. So don't go away.
Well, it's called the Holy Land. And the Holy Land is a melting pot of faith, politics, and ideology. In a setting that combines biblical history and present-day turmoil, this chaotic atmosphere can make life difficult for Christians who often get caught in the middle. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has that story.
Pastor Stephen Curry embraces his task of guiding the faithful through what some may call a minefield of society. A volatile mix of ideology, history, and family in a land where Christians make up a fraction of the population, surrounded by Jewish and Muslim majorities.
Living in this divided land as a Christian Arab has challenged me to tear down barriers.
Born in Bethlehem, Curry is president of Holy Land Missions. For 30 years, it has reached out to Arab Christians struggling in times of poverty and war. Unlike most Arab ministries, HLM is based on what they call full covenant theology, meaning the belief that God's covenants, including to Israel, are eternal.
I remember some years ago going to Bethlehem. There was a guy named Elias Fresh who was mayor. He's a Christian, and Bethlehem was essentially a Christian town. And the last time I was there, Yasser Arafat had his headquarters in Bethlehem, and it was an armed camp. Now, Stephen Curry is founder of what's called the Holy Land Missions, and he's pastor of Jerusalem's Baptist Church. And Stephen's here with us. Stephen, you're an Israeli Arab Christian. You grew up in Bethlehem, and you've seen a whole bunch of warriors in that holy city, haven't you?
We sure have. I was born in Jerusalem, as you mentioned. And I grew up seeing a lot of bloodshed, a lot of war over the years. And the only hope that I saw come to people's hearts is the hope of Jesus Christ.
What has happened under the Palestinian Authority? Have they persecuted Christians? Can you give me some examples of what they've done?
Well, in 2010, the PA deemed our ministry, which is the evangelical, born-again church community, as illegitimate church. So they defranchised us and called us illegitimate in 2010, meaning not accepting marriage certificates, any birth certificates, or what be it, solely on the fact that we have different beliefs than the other Christians within the community. They've come a long way. They've, thanks for the pressures of international governments, so they've come a long way than what they were, but they can still do a lot more. At one point, Bethlehem was 85% Christian and 15% Muslim and other, and now the pendulum is completely swapped. When you talk about Bethlehem and surrounding villages and towns, there's only about 15 to 16% Christian, all denominations lumped together, and less.
What's happened? Has the Palestinian Authority actually driven the Christians out? Have they arrested them? What have they done?
Well, it's lack of jobs, lack of economy, of course, pressures as well from some of the fanatics within the community that have pressured Christian communities out and so forth. And it's interesting because what it comes down to is, what is the answer? That is the question. And what we've realized, my father who started the church in Bethlehem, what we've realized today, Brother Pat, is that we have to sit down and build bridges in the context of building bridges on truth. How do you do that? Well, we showed the PA that when you work with the other side in honesty, in integrity, in trust, when you do that, it actually builds a society. So recently we've been able to meet with many world leaders and to tell them that the answer for the Arab solution isn't a political answer. It's the outcome of it is politics, but it stems from the heart issue and building relationships.
I remember talking to your father, and he indicated that when Christians or others went to Mecca on the Hajj, that they came back with a bad spirit. Something happened to them. Could you amplify that? Or you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but it's, there is, they say get overcome by emotional spirit. That's what they say. But of course we know it's the good versus the evil within their spirit. It's the God nature within them fighting the evil nature that exists within mankind. That's why I've been asked this on media and others. What's the answer? The answer is Jesus. That's the answer. There's no more simple way to put it, and that's why Jerusalem is such a big part in this Middle Eastern process. There is a movement today to eradicate Christianity from the Arab part of Jerusalem. And they've called us as the only ones standing in their way from eradicating Christianity. And it's because we're very strong in sharing the gospel. We're very strong in bringing Jews and Arabs together, Muslim Arabs, Christian Arabs, and Jewish people, Orthodox Jews together to sit down. It's not an interfaith, but sitting down to sort of humanize each other, to understand that you have a different belief system, you have different convictions, but that does not make you any lesser human being than I am. And nor does it give me the right to attack you or hurt you or kill you because you have different views. And that's led us to today having the honor to speak in many Jewish synagogues. I, as an Arab, speak in a synagogue, but talk about Jesus. And by invitation.
Well, now, what's like for you, for a Palestinian Arab Christian living in Bethlehem, living in Jerusalem? Well, what's it like?
Brother Pat, I've seen a shift in so many dynamics, from politics, from faith, from dwindling numbers and statistics. It's an up and down wave. We've seen suffering, we've seen persecution over the years. Sometimes it's instigated by government. Sometimes the government steps in to help. If things have come a long way, are things better in the Palestinian communities than they were? 100% they're better. Why? That's because of Christians around the world praying for the peace of Jerusalem and the land. Christians around the world, folks like yourself, bringing stories out of there to expose to the world what's happening. And of course, pressures from international leaders and Christian leaders and world world leaders on the Israeli-Palestinian leadership to create an atmosphere that's safer for Christianity. That's why it all goes back to Jerusalem. That's why we are focused much on creating a center in Jerusalem.
I was reading in Isaiah today where he says, give the Lord no rest until he makes Jerusalem a praise in the midst of all the nations.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, don't give him any rest. You keep praying constantly for Jerusalem to be...
you keep knocking. And that's why I want to tell you and others who have been praying for Jerusalem, don't give up on Jerusalem. When you pray for the Jews, we have to pray for the Arabs. There is enough room in the heart of the Father to love the Jews, to love the Arabs. We see ourselves, Brother Pat, as an Arab Christian community, evangelical, born again. We see ourselves as a big part of helping bringing peace to Jerusalem. How? By bringing people to the scriptures, that the God that we serve is a God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Sure. This is a biblical fact, and that's why we have to invest in Jerusalem from a biblical perspective and from a covenant perspective as well.
Stephen, thank you so much for being. May the Lord bless you.
Thank you, Brother Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen Curry, Holy Land Mission, a place where we should pray. But that's what it said. Don't give God any rest. Not only yourself, don't stop praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Terry.
Well, still ahead, you know her voice. Now, hear her story. Sandi Patty reveals the secret she hid on stage. So don't go away. She's going to sing, too. Patty has a vocal range of about 4 octaves and has been releasing chart-topping songs for decades. So it's no surprise to hear that she's been nicknamed The Voice, which is ironic considering that she spent most of her life too afraid to speak up for herself.
Sandi Patty is the most awarded female vocalist in contemporary Christian music history. Yet for decades, she struggled to find her voice because of a dark secret she had locked away. When she was only 6 years old, Sandi was sexually abused by a family friend who was also a first-grade teacher. In her book, The Voice, Sandi shares how she sang to millions about God's love when she hardly believed it herself.
Well, Sandi Patty is here with us now, and it's so good to have you on the 700 Club again.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Reading your book, The Voice, was just so eye-opening and touching and frustrating at the same time, because what happened to you as a 6-year-old shouldn't happen to any child, but happens to lots of children.
Yeah.
Your mom and dad were singing themselves at the time. That's where she gets that amazing voice and musical talent from. And they traveled some, and so they had you stay with, I mean, who wouldn't put their child with a first-grade teacher?
Exactly.
You know, and that, you were there for a week, and every night without fail, that woman molested you.
Yes.
Tell me what went through your mind at that time as a 6-year-old. I mean, I can't imagine.
I was already kind of a shy kid anyway, and a very compliant kid. And so what sexual abuse does, it rips the sacred out of a child. Yeah. And so my already quiet voice really became silenced. And you start to take in and believe the lies that it's your fault and you were, you deserved this. You're a bad girl. And if you tell anybody, they're not going to believe you, or you'll get in trouble. So for another 30 years, I never said a word and didn't talk to my parents until 35 years later.
Wow.
And, but I'm so very grateful to be on this side of it, because I know that God was faithful in all of the healing.
Yeah, so much of what you went through, I think how perpetrators do this to a child is the repetition. And at that time, as you point out in your book, there were no cell phones, there were no computers available, your mom and dad were gone. I mean, you don't even know how, as a 6-year-old, how do you even get in touch with them?
Right.
Yeah, so you were so alone in the midst of this. And you handled it by just pretending you were sleeping and being, but enduring, just enduring. And yet, this woman was smart enough to say to you, if you tell your parents what happened. Yeah. Is that why you didn't tell?
I think, you believe the adults in your life, because as a kid,
especially adults your parents put you
right. As a kid, Adults are safe.
Yeah.
You don't know any different, and especially a teacher. And so when she said, if you tell, I'll, we'll do this again or whatever.
And they're gonna believe me, and every child thinks I'm just a kid. Of course they're going to believe him or her.
Exactly.
So how did this, Sandi, impact your life after that? Because when it removes the sacred, it has to touch everything.
It does. I think of it as, in a way, it set my whole clock wrong. Yeah. It turned it upside down. And so what I took in, the lies, I sort of viewed life through that lens.
Yeah.
And so that I wasn't worth anything, that I wasn't valuable or beautiful or lovely. And that I was damaged. I was damaged and disqualified ever from God loving me.
Your mom and dad must have been horrified to hear this years later.
Yeah.
How did you begin to put the pieces together? Let's talk about, first of all, that even you married shortly on in the early phases of your amazing success. And you say in the book that it was two wounded people coming together.
Yeah.
So it was bound not to be healthy or last long.
Broken people make a broken marriage.
Yeah.
That's not an excuse, but it's a reason.
It's a reality, yeah.
And I think as I began to grow and really understand, let myself be vulnerable for the first time in my life to a group of girlfriends who'd walked through life, and to hear them talk about the struggles in their life, I kind of went, oh, maybe I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a safe place to say something about it. I'll tell you, Terry, when God began to put his truth in my heart, I started Bible Study Fellowship. And I had the time away from home, away from the road, to be home.
Uh-huh.
And I had the time to invest in Bible Study Fellowship, which taught me two things. One, God's word is so powerful. Mm-hmm. And when his word begins to put it in your life, the lies have to have someplace else to go.
Yep.
So they're going to burp up or they're going to bubble up, but they have to have someplace else to go. And I think the second thing that I learned was what a sweet community it can be to share life with other people who are also walking, just step by step. And when my discussion group began to just be real about their lives and what they were going through, I thought, I just didn't know you could do that. Yeah. I didn't know you could be honest and vulnerable before the Lord. Yeah. And so as I began to learn that really helped influence how I began to speak up and to speak out.
I think of one incident in the book where you talk about your dad so innocently when you shared something that had been done to you at school unfairly by a friend, asking you what you had done to deserve that. Yeah. As parents, we're so wanting our kids to be kind, to be compassionate, to be merciful, to treat others well. Yes. But because of what had happened to you, this was like one more, what's wrong with me?
Yes.
We have to be so careful as parents what we say, don't we?
It really is true. My husband and I have raised 8 kids, and we've gotten so much more wrong than we have right.
Most of us have.
And, I have found, somebody said to me one time, if you don't know what to say to your kid when they're confiding in you about something, a great phrase is, tell me more about that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because like my dad, he's such an encourager. And
he's a
my
great
parents.
Guy. I adore your parents.
He's such an encourager, and he wants to encourage so much. But already having the broken lens that I had.
It wasn't your dad, what he said, it was the brokenness that was in your heart. Yeah.
I heard you don't need to talk about this. You should not speak up. That's not at all his tender heart. And I actually called him ahead of the book release. I said, Dad, I put this story in here. I want you to know it was not about you.
Yeah.
It was about the brokenness and how I viewed things.
Yeah. What would you say to people who are watching right now, there are so many people who have been misused, abused, molested, even raped? How do you begin to come out of the mess of that wholeness and truth?
Well, I think the very first thing is you begin, the first place to start finding your voice is listening.
Yeah, wow,
you begin to listen to the people around you. If they're willing to share bits and pieces of the not so pretty parts about their story, chances are they're going to be a good one to listen. And so begin to listen to the people around you. I always think, find somebody who's a little farther along in your journey, than you are. And I have always been a fan of good, solid Christian counseling, because there are some issues that you just need the time and the space and a gifted counselor to be able to guide you gently towards God, which also then helps with that healing.
I want to mention that your book is called The Voice, and I'm mentioning the book now, such a pretty cover. And listening to God's voice and finding your own. Awesome, awesome life endeavor. Sandy's going to sing for us in just a moment, but first of all, tell us about the song you're singing today.
The song I'm singing is one I recorded many years ago. I love the lyric. I'm a lyric person, and so words, when they were hard for me as a kid, music was that way for me to speak my voice. And I think it's just a great reminder that we don't always have all the facts when we see people, but in heaven's eyes, there are no losers.
Amen.
In heaven's eyes, no hopeless cause.
I'm going to let you move over to the piano where we await your performance with great anticipation, while I tell folks that for more on Sandy's story, you really should check out her book. It's called The Voice, Listening for God's Voice and Finding Your Own, and it's available in stores nationwide. And now, here's Sandy singing In Heaven's Eyes.
Welcome back to the 700 Club. Asia Bibi is finally on her way to safety. A French newspaper reported Bibi's lawyer said she's on a plane out of Pakistan, headed to an undisclosed location. Her acquittal from blasphemy charges against Islam set off protests and calls for a public hanging. She and her husband feared for their family's safety. It is unclear whether any of Bibi's family were on the plane out of Pakistan with her. The 79 school children kidnapped from a Presbyterian church in Cameroon have been released. The kidnapping took place late Sunday by an unidentified armed separatist group. The church leader confirmed that the children were returned Wednesday looking tired and psychologically tortured. 2 of the 3 staff members abducted are still being held. The church leader said he was closing the school due to a lack of security. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com. Pat and Terry will be back with more of the 700 Club right after this.
During World War II, Hava heard rumors about innocent Jews being killed by the Nazis. At first, she didn't believe them until she was sent to Auschwitz. Thankfully, Hava made it out alive, and today she lives in Israel, where she gets much-needed care from her friends at Operation Blessing.
Hava is a 94-year-old widow and Holocaust survivor. She was one of the last Hungarian Jews to be put on a train for Auschwitz.
The train car was very crowded and uncomfortable, but there was no fear. We heard rumors of what was happening to the Jews in Poland, but we didn't believe them. My mind could not comprehend what was about to happen.
In Auschwitz, the women were split into 2 lines. Hava was selected to go to a labor camp, while the rest of her family members were marched off to the gas chambers.
For the longest time, I didn't really understand what had happened to them. Even after the war, I held hope that I would see them again, but they died in Auschwitz.
Hava told me by the end of the war, Nazi operations were moving so fast they weren't even bothering to tattoo numbers on prisoners. She was forced to work in a textile factory until the Russians liberated the camp in 1945. Miraculously, Hava's husband survived the war and they reunited. Later, they moved to Jerusalem where they raised their children.
I was the only survivor for my family, and this tormented me. But my husband and I knew we couldn't cry over the dead, but must rejoice for the living.
Hava said rejoicing can be difficult, not just because she's in her 90s, but because she's been wearing the same dentures for 20 years. They should have been replaced about 13 years ago.
They caused me a lot of pain, and I couldn't eat in front of people without my teeth. So they limited me socially. New dentures are very expensive, and I just didn't have the money. I felt handicapped.
So Operation Blessing paid for Hava to get brand new dentures. We also paid for the follow-up visits to get them fitting perfectly and comfortably. Finally, we gave Hava a special gift basket so she'd have something tasty to enjoy with her new teeth.
You have all been so lovely to me. With my old dentures, I couldn't say Mazel Tov because I couldn't form the words. But now I can say it freely without worrying about my dentures falling out. It's made me so happy.
Thanks to Operation Blessing, Hava has what she needs to enjoy life to the fullest.
It's unbelievable knowing there are people in the world, non-Jews, who saw our suffering and opened their hearts to us. You choose to do something to help make our lives better, and I'm so grateful for that. I thank God for you.
Hava has endured so much. It's a pleasure to be able to come alongside of her at this time in her life and bring her fellowship and also meet the needs that she has in her life. This is just one of the things that Operation Blessing and CBN together are doing in Israel and in the Middle East, and you're doing it around the world if you're a 700 Club member. If you're not, you can be a part of that. It's 65 cents a day, $20 a month. You are meeting the needs of people in desperate situations the world over, and we want you to join with us. Will you do that? Our number's toll free. It's 1-800-700-7000. Just call and say, I want to join the 700 Club today. We'll gladly welcome you to the family of ministries here where we're digging water wells, we're providing education for children, we're making it possible for children who've been orphaned to live in family settings, so many, many things. So thank you, 700 Club members. And to the rest of you just joining, we want to send you miraculous blessings. This will talk to you about things that have happened miraculously in the lives of people who are believers, but also how do you align yourself with the blessings of God? It's our gift to you when you call right now. Okay, time for some email. Are you ready?
All right, let's go for it.
This first one comes from John, who says, why does the church only talk about pornography being a problem that only affects men? I have walked in on my sister watching pornographic videos and also while having phone sex with her boyfriend. I think there are a lot of women getting away with this sort of behavior because they know that the church will not address this as an issue that affects both genders.
Well, I think that the predominant group affected by porn, men are more visual and women aren't. But obviously they do watch porn. I mean, why does the church do what it does? I don't know why the church doesn't. But honestly, I think if you have 100 people and 5 of them aren't involved and 95 are, then you deal with the 95. I think that's really what it amounts to. But I think we need minister to women as well as men. And of course, there's phone sex and things like that. It goes on. And as a matter of fact, the phone sex, the workers are usually women who these men call and they have this relationship. All right.
Okay, this is from Terry, not me, I might add. And she says, or he says, I'm not sure which, I'm kind of concerned about something I heard Pat say in the context of using essential oils. He said that he put several drops of oregano oil in water and drank it. My concern is that oregano is considered a hot oil and can actually do harm to delicate tissues if not diluted with a carrier oil like coconut, olive, etc. Pat may have taken an oregano oil that was already diluted with a carrier oil when he bought it, or God may have divinely protected him. Some reputable companies do not dilute their oils ahead of time, but expect the customer to know to do this. Pat, do you know what kind of oil you used? And would you mention this sometime on your show so that no one comes to harm from using undiluted oregano oil?
I must confess, I have no idea what you're talking about. But
well, there, Lori did talk about that, and in Dr. Axe's book that we had on the program, he talked about which oils needed to be diluted.
Well, all I know is that it's diluted already. You get 8 drops of water, of oil in about a 12-ounce glass of water. So it's already diluted, but it sure does work. It's unbelievable. So I didn't notice any ill effects. I don't know about whether it was buffered with some other oil or not, but it's called oil of oregano, so there's oil in it, obviously.
Yeah, people probably just in everything health-wise need to do their research and their homework.
That's right. Well, but it's called oil of oregano, so it's not oregano, it's oil thereof. Okay.
Okay, this is a viewer who says, my wife has been attending the same church for the past 27 years and is a very loyal person when it comes to the pastor and his wife. After we were married and I changed churches to hers, it was good for a little bit. Then I felt the Lord tell me that finances of the church were being mismanaged. This was confirmed in a financial report where it stated many of the staff members had not been paid in 8 years. But my wife says she doesn't remember seeing it. I don't feel comfortable going to this church or paying tithes there. Would it be wrong for us to attend church separately?
It's not. It's a pity you can't show your wife this same thing. With the church is mismanaging and hadn't paid its employees in many years. There's something wrong about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, of course, it wouldn't hurt to leave. I mean, it's a voluntary association. You go to this place. It's not. It isn't like we only got one temple like they did in Israel. I mean, we've got many, many, many branches of Christianity, and the thing you need to find one that's upstanding and righteous and true to the word and where there's a good fellowship. Okay.
Right. Okay, this is a viewer who says, did President Trump ever secure our protection from nuclear EMP attacks and natural EMP from solar superstorms?
To the best of my knowledge, he didn't. And this is an area that I have talked about. The EMP is extraordinary, and it doesn't cost a lot of money to harden our electric grid. But if we have an EMP attack or we have a thermonuclear blast in the atmosphere, it can fry the whole grid around the country, and it'll be devastating. So that's something has been addressed like it should have been, but it should be a major, major issue before the government, and it's just a few $1 billion considering the fact that we've got $1 trillion+ economy. Well, we leave you with today's power minute from the book of Ephesians. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. Thanks so much for being with us. Hey, tomorrow, Kathleen Gifford is going to inspire us with her new children's book. So for Terry and me, bye-bye.